In this video clip, we're going to look at how to use SVG graphics inside Blender. Now, an SVG is a scalable vector graphic which actually gets created in Illustrator and imported into Blender. It comes in very much like a Bezier curve, so it needs to be converted to a mesh, and then you can kind of extrude and make a shape out of it. So I've got a sample, like a curved window here. There are some problems bringing in SVGs. You can see they don't create a very consistent mesh, so there's lots of often additional vertex points and edges, which if it's a solid object that you're going to work with, it's not such a big deal, but they do need a little bit of tidying up to make work effectively inside Blender. So what I'll do is I'll just take you through the process of creating a SVG in Illustrator and then importing it into Blender, converting it to a mesh and tidying up the resulting vertexes and edges a little bit. So I'm just going to flick over to Illustrator. I've got kind of a pre-made arch window here. I'll just take you through the method I use to make it. There's a few ways to do it, so I'll just delete this object. For this first one, I just used a couple of simple primitives. So I had a rectangle, and then I create an ellipse for the top of the curve, and I'll just line them up and intersect them, make this a bit smaller, slightly less pronounced curve, just get everything to line up a little bit better. So just using two simple primitive tools, this is the kind of shape of a window. Select both objects, then come over to my Pathfinder and just unite them, and that will create a single window object like this. Now I'm just going to click with the direct selection tool on the object so you can see the number of points here, and these are exactly the same as the Bezier curves that we looked at in a previous video. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, which looks good. Unfortunately, when I bring it into Blender, it's going to add a few additional vertex points there, which means it's not such a clean model to work with, but that's okay. The other way that you could create a curved object using an SVG is with the pen tool. So I'll do a similar thing. So create a curve for the window. It's not going to look as good. Create a straight line. If I hold down Shift, it creates a straight line. And Shift, so I've got a half a window here. And I'm just going to copy and paste it, and then go to my Object, Transform, Reflect, and it will do like a 90-degree reflection, just line them up together. Really important here that there's still two different shapes. I'm going to go to Object, Path, and click Join, and that will join it together to one object if they were two objects. So this is kind of two ways that I can make a two-dimensional vector graphic to bring into Blender to work with. So I'm going to just delete this object, so I only take this one I created with the pen tool through. I'm going to save it, and really important here in Illustrator we go Save As, and I'll just give it a new name because I've already been working with a file called Arch Window, so I'll call this V1.1, version 1.1. And really important down here at the bottom, we don't save as an Illustrator native file, we actually choose the scalable vector graphic, which is the bottom option there under the Save As. Now, a scalable vector graphic, hopefully you remember from the web coding course, is just basically a bunch of digital code which will then be translated into a two-dimensional object in Blender. So just save that and click OK. I'm saving to a folder I've set up in my Blender project to save it to. So I'm going to just open up Blender here. So you see I've already got some objects here. So I'm just going to move, I'll increase the size, just move this object away. The object will basically come in where I have the 3D cursor as its like origin point, and whoops, Just click it kind of in the middle there. That's where I want it to come in. What will happen is that the object will come in really, really small into Blender. Remember, in Blender we're looking at things which are like 1 meter or 2 meters or 5 meters, and that's kind of the literal size. But in Illustrator, if you're just working with like a default A4 document or something like that, it's actually going to literally come in at that size. It'll come in a very, very small way, and I'll just have to make it larger. So to bring it in, we just go File and we choose Import, and then you'll see fourth one down, Scalable Vector Graphics. These are all file types that we can bring in to Blender, so there's a few options there. And I've already navigated through to my project folder, but I have on my desktop, I've got a folder with images, and these are the SVG images I've been working with. So I'm just going to import SVG, and you'll say, where is it? Well, it's there. It's really, really tiny as I kind of zoom in. So, whoops, I'm going to move away from my cursor key. So here's my object. I can scale it up and make it much larger, which I think would be a great thing to do. So it's getting a little bit larger there. You also notice that the center point, the pivot point, is actually in the middle, but the object is off to the side of it, and that's basically because it's using the 0, point on the A4 sheet. I use in Illustrator as the beginning point for the object. Now, if I want the origin point to be on the object, I can go over to Object and I can go Set Origin, and I can set origin to geometry. That will just kind of move it into the middle of it, which might make it a little bit easier for you to maneuver and manipulate the object. So I'll just make this a little bit larger so you can see it a little bit better. So as we scale it with the other objects, you can see the kind of size of it. Now, this is still a Bezier object, so if I go to my edit mode, you'll notice that I have my and just make sure I'm in tweak mode, not select box. We have our points which we can manipulate. So excuse me, there's a few this model looks alright, but when it comes time to convert it to a mesh, it's going to have a few extra points in. Now I'm going to just try and delete a few vertices to just kind of simplify my model a little bit, so it's more in keeping with the object I previously had. That may not work because you remember when I joined the object, it would have extra points at each point. Oh, I've got a point there. That kind of looks okay. I'll just kind of leave that there. I'm slightly suspicious of it, but let's just leave that there. And I'm going to go back to object mode to convert it to a mesh. And the way that we do that is we select the object menu again, go down to convert to, and we're going to choose mesh from curve meta surface text and click on that. And that's now changed it to a mesh, which if I go back to edit mode, you'll see it's got all these new vertexes. And I talked about how it sometimes brings in some crazy extra points. It's kind of done that. These weren't on the SVG I drew. It was just kind of generated in the import. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it up a little bit by deleting a whole lot of these because I don't actually need them. So I can hold down Shift and select all these objects. So we've kind of been through this before. I only really need the first and the last vertex. When I hit delete and delete vertexes, what it means is I've broken the link here, so I need to select these two vertexes and create a edge, and I can do that by hitting F, and then if I click on the other two vertices there and select F again, it will place a face across the object. So this is the object that I've made. I can extrude it now, so I'm just going to hit A, which will select everything, and go to face mode and click on the extrude tool, and that can let me extrude the element out. And you can see that looks very, very similar to the object I previously had been working with. And I'll just move this over here. So that's how you bring an SVG graphic into Blender. Depending on your workflow, it can be an easier way and quicker way to work to bring elements into Blender. It's just one option that you have to work with. So think about it when it's time to maybe design some detailed parts of your building, which might be easier to draw up in 2 dimensions in Illustrator and then bring into Blender and extrude.